Today we're going to take a quick look at the conclusion of Graham Greene's The Destructors. We're also going to go back and make sure that you understand some key points before the quiz. Part 4 starts with all the boys, except Mike, diligently working through the night. Even with Mr. Thomas locked in the loo out back, they are running out of time. The shift in power that occurred in Part 3 continues here, as is evidenced by the fact that most of the named characters are referenced in Part 4. Mike has gone home to bed because he's by far the youngest of the group. Blackie is making critical decisions because he's in charge again. The boys have sent Summers outside to keep watch, probably because nobody wanted to be around Summers. They didn't like him very much. I don't like him very much. In fact, I really don't like him. I think I might hate this kid. And Mr. Thomas is still sitting out back in the loo. We don't know where the fat boy called Joe is, but let's be honest, until I just mentioned him, you'd completely forgotten that he existed. In fact, there's really no reason for me to bring him up unless, of course, he's going to be on the quiz. But where's T? We know he's still there. Blackie protected him to keep him around, but he's never mentioned at all in Part 4. He's very likely the one that brings Mr. Thomas the blanket and the food, but we don't know that for sure. He's become a nameless, faceless member of the gang again. He's served his purpose, and now he's faded into the background. Mr. Thomas still thinks the boys are playing a joke on him. He doesn't recognize the severity of what's going on. T, stripped of his identity, is likely the boy who speaks to Mr. Thomas. He tells Mr. Thomas that it's nothing personal, that the boys want him to be comfortable through his night in the loo. There's a disconnect from reality, or at least the old reality, in the boys' comments. Of course it's personal. It was a man's home. It was his past and his future. The next morning, the owner of the lone car in the car park arrives. When he begins to pull away, there's a horrific crash. The boys have tied one end of a rope around the home's last support, and the other end around the car's bumper. When the driver gets out of the car, he sees that the whole house is gone. He also hears Mr. Thomas screaming and frees him. Mr. Thomas can do nothing but moan, "My house!" The driver can do nothing but laugh. When Mr. Thomas protests, the driver tells him, "There's nothing personal, but you gotta admit it's funny." So let's recap. The Destructors is about a group of young boys living in post-World War II London. They don't have much, but they have a remarkable bout of freedom. They fill their days nicking free rides off the local buses and playing in the car park and streets. But then they're joined by a new boy who's somehow different, and he wants more from life. The boys live in an area that suffered a lot of damage in the Blitz of World War II. Most of that damage hasn't been repaired. There's one house that, however damaged, is still standing and still inhabited. The owner of that house is a grouchy old man, who they call Old Misery. But as it turns out, he's not really so much grouchy as he's just old and lonely. But by the time we learn that, the boys have already made a decision to destroy the house, starting on the inside and working their way out. When they're done, there's absolutely nothing left of the house. The story's about a lot of things, but it's primarily about change. The old making way for the new. And the idea that every act of creation is also an act of destruction, and vice versa. When you create something new, you destroy something old, even if that something was just an idea of the way things are. When you destroy something old, you create space for something new to exist. And when you destroy something, you also create the idea of a new world, in which that thing or idea no longer exists. The story's about change, and the fact that sometimes that change comes with a reason, and other times that change comes because some men just want to watch the world burn. And it's nothing personal.